great day. 1 year back, on 20th February, on a very small scale, the Siksha and Anusandhan Fortnightly academic lecture was conceived by our Vice Chancellor, and we were both instrumental in making this journey successful. Uninterruptedly, the Siksha and Anusandhan Fortnightly academic lecture series is being conducted regularly, and many distinguished diplomats, professional academicians from different fields have joined this lecture. I request all of you to kindly mute yourself. So this is indeed a great day for all of us, and we are really privileged to have amongst us the Silver Jubilee Oration speaker, His Excellency Sri Binaya Srikanta Pradhan, who is presently the High Commissioner of India to Tanzania. And all the viewers will be very happy to know that he belongs to the state of Odisha, and that Western Odisha district of Devagad. So it's really a great pleasure and privilege on our part to have you, sir. So because this is the 25th oration, and this is a great milestone, so I will be happy to introduce all of you, the 24 speakers who have graced this occasion as speakers in different Siksha and Anusandhan Fortnightly academic series. So then I will introduce the speaker to all of you, and finally the speaker will be speaking on today's topic. So let me present my screen. Just wait. So the Silver Jubilee SOAFAL Oration, as I have mentioned you earlier, today's speaker is His Excellency Sri Binaya Srikanta Pradhan, High Commissioner of India to Tanzania. The first oration was given by our Vice Chancellor, Professor Ashok Kumar Mahapatra, and Dr. Kamal Kumar Kaur, on the topic of how to lead a healthy lifestyle and voluntarism, a call of the day, and on 20th February. The second oration was given by Professor Gangadhar Sahu on student-teacher relationship, a divine gift, who is also the Dean, IMS and SOM Hospital, Siksha and Anusandhan University. Then Dr. Shruti Mahapatra, founder and chief executive of Swabhiman, gave a talk on Think Differently to Create an Inclusive Society. Then Professor Damodar Acharya, who is the chairman of the advisory board of Siksha and Anusandhan University and the former vice chancellor of BPUT, on post-COVID education. Then Sri C. Rajasekhar, OSD, Ministry of External Affairs, Government of India, spoke on human life, a pursuit of professional, emotional and spiritual excellence. Then Sri Jogiranjan Panigrahi, Joint Secretary in the Ministry of Textiles and now the Principal Commissioner, balancing economic pursuits with human values. Then Professor B.K. Parida, Professor of Physics, retired Regional Institute of Education, Bhubaneswar, on the oddball super genius. Then Dr. Sudhanshu Sadangi, IPS and presently CMD of Odisha State Police Housing and Welfare Corporation, on the question of morality. And then Dr. W.G. Prasanna Kumar, he spoke on an ounce of practice is better than tons of advice, and he is presently the chairman of Mahatma Gandhi National Council of Rural Education. Then Spiritualism for a Healthy Society by Professor Ashok Kumar Mahapatra, the Vice Chancellor of Siksha and Anusandhan University. How to integrate Indian knowledge system into modern education is spoken by Professor Kapil Kapoor, Chairman, Indian Institute of Advanced Studies, Simla. A Confident India amidst the COVID-19 pandemic was delivered by Consul General of India to Ho Chi Minh City, Dr. Madan Mohan Sethi. Swami Vivekananda's message to the youth on the occasion of the penultimate year of 75th anniversary of India's independence was given by Parbrajika Divyananda Prana, the monastic member of Sri Sarada Matha Dakshineshwar. Then non-violence as a categorical imperative for sustainable world order, Sri Satyanarayan Sahu, former press secretary to former president of India, Sri K.R. Narayanan. Healthy diet and lifestyle, professor and head gastroenterology, Institute of Medical Science and some, Professor Manoj Kumar Sahu, who is a volunteer by Professor Dr. Bhagavan Prakash, social scientist and senior advisor to Election Commission of India. Mind Matters Most by Sri Santmanu, Development Commissioner, Handicrafts and Director General NIFT, Ministry of Textiles, Government of India. Then Professor Somesh Kumar, Center of Excellence in Indian Knowledge System, IIT Kharagpur, on the evolution of modern number system, India's gift to the world. Then Sri U.P. Singh, Secretary, Ministry of Textiles, Government of India, on the topic My Journey. Then His Excellency Arun Kumar Rao, High Commissioner of India to Trinidad and Tobago, on the topic of the Gandhiji we all must know. Then India and Japan, Seen Through History, by Professor Rajaram Panda, Senior Fellow, Nehru Memorial Museum and Library, New Delhi. And then Contribution of Ancient India to Mathematics and Astronomy, Professor Dr. Nachiketa K. Sarma, Director Outreach and International Admission, Siksha and Anusandhan University. India at 75 by Dr. A.V.S. Rameshchandra, High Commissioner of India to Uganda, former High Commissioner of India to Uganda and Additional Secretary in the Ministry of External Affairs. Special Place of East and South Africa and Indian Diplomacy by Sri Punit R. Kundal, Joint Secretary, East and South Africa Division. So this is the down the corridor of the SOAFAL lectures. And today we are really privileged to have amongst us Sri Binaya Srikanta Pradhan, who is a career diplomat. Just let me first stop the sharing. Just do it, please. Hope I am just okay. So Sri Binaya Srikanta Pradhan is a career diplomat and belongs to the 2002 batch of the Indian Foreign Service. He is fluent in English, Russian, Hindi, and Odia languages. As a diplomat, he served in senior positions in Indian Embassies in Moscow, Turkmenistan, and Pakistan during 2004 to 12. He looked after India's relationship with Afghanistan and Iran at the Ministry of External Affairs, New Delhi. During 2014 to 19, Mr. Pradhan worked as the Chief of Staff to the Minister of Petroleum and Natural Gas, Government of India. Prior to his current appointment as High Commissioner of India to Tanzania, Mr. Pradhan was the Deputy Chief of Mission, Embassy of India, Moscow, from June 2019 to July 2021. Mr. Pradhan has keen interest in economic and energy diplomacy. He is also an observer of developments in Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Central Asia. Mr. Pradhan has widely traveled. He enjoys playing golf. He is married and has 2 daughters. So today's topic is the ABC of economic and energy diplomacy. Now I welcome you, sir, to kindly deliver the Silver Jubilee Siksha and Anusandhan Fortnightly Academic Oration. Now the platform belongs to you. Welcome you, sir. Thank you very much. Please unmute yourself, sir. Please unmute. Please unmute yourself.
Okay, I think I'm audible now.
Yes, now you are audible, sir.
Okay. So, Professor Nachiket Sharma, Director of the University Outreach Program, other participants present today, I must thank the university for inviting me on such a prestigious occasion. I also invite everybody who is present here to listen to me today. Let me begin by congratulating the faculty and the students of SOA on this Silver Jubilee occasion. 25 years is a milestone in itself. And SOA, I belong to ODISHA, so I know about SOA. And I can say that SOA has immensely contributed in the field of education in these last 25 years. Today, I have been asked to talk about economic and energy diplomacy. Like Mr. Sharma mentioned, I worked for 5 years in the Ministry of Petroleum on a deputation with the Minister of Petroleum. I also worked in our embassies, which focus on economic and energy diplomacy, primarily like Russia. In Turkmenistan, when I was working that time, energy was a primary focus of our bilateral relationship. So I have some experience of working in energy and economic diplomacy. But today I'll be speaking a little more on the the theoretical aspect of what is economic diplomacy, what is energy diplomacy. I'll give some examples of what is happening around the world on these topics. So like each of the two topics is a vast topic, but I'll try to cover some aspects on both of them. So economic diplomacy is a term that is frequently used, in these days. People define it as use of economic tools to achieve foreign policy objective. Many others now understand it as use of diplomacy to achieve economic well-being of a country. But in the era of globalization, there is no doubt that economic interdependence among countries is a reality. And with economic diplomacy, one can leverage this to one's advantage. So while all countries want to make the most out of economic diplomacy, some of them have been effective, they are successful, while many are not. So for success in economic diplomacy, all the stakeholders of a country must work together. It includes the ministries of foreign affairs, Ministry of Commerce, Industry, Finance. You have to have your business houses, chambers of commerce, financial sectors, business think tanks, the tourism industry, and host of domestic actors, primarily the states, who are not only the stakeholders, but the primary movers. So you have to have all these entities to work together. You have example of about 20 countries who have combined their ministries of foreign affairs with Ministry of Commerce and Trade, countries like Denmark, Finland, Iceland, Norway, Sweden, Australia, Canada, Mauritius, New Zealand, South Korea. They have kind of integrated their two ministries of trade and diplomacy to have more effective economic diplomacy. We also have examples of smaller countries. They come together to develop a joint foreign trade negotiation mechanism. Like in Caribbean, for example, you have 15 countries coming together under a banner of CARICOM, and they have a common strategy of economic diplomacy. So in the modern world of diplomacy, I think until the Second World War, economic diplomacy was getting more of a secondary focus. After 1945, however, the term has gained popularity. This is not specifically in the background of the trade blocs coming up, evolution of economic unions in Europe, then coming up of Bretton Woods institutions like IMF, World Bank, and GATT, which was the predecessor of WTO. Even in the present UN Charter, there is a reference about using economic sanctions in case of there is a breach of no threat to peace and security of the world. So during the Cold War period, we all know that the Western Bloc, led by the United States, and Communist Bloc, led by the USSR, used economic diplomacy to win countries to their sides. The objective was very clear. It was to contain the spread of influence of the other side. Both sides were trying to befriend newly independent countries like, countries in Asia, Africa, Latin America, to get them into their security alliances. In our neighborhood, we had SEATO and CENTO, which was more like an American security alliance, and we had Pakistan as member of these groupings. Under the Marshall Plan, I think we all know about Marshall Plan, the United States provided massive economic aid to Western European countries to rebuild their economies. They all benefited from that. But of course, the objective was to have geopolitical influence over Western Europe. Similar assistance was given to Japan, South Korea, and other members of American alliance. Many times you'll see example of this economic assistance being used to procure defense equipment, which would lead to closer strategic relationship. So it's not a coincidence that many of these economic assistance receiving countries were members of NATO, SEATO, and CENTO. Now you would see what the Russians were doing, the Soviet Union at that point of time. It was more like a mirror image of what the Americans were doing. They're providing preferential terms of trade, economic, military assistance to the countries in Eastern Europe, to their allies, and to a lot of non-aligned countries. Here again, the primary objective was to prevent those countries to fall for Western Bloc. However, after 1991, after the Cold War, the economic diplomacy has become more complex. The number of players have increased multifold, and the instruments have also increased by many times. So coming back to the general mechanism of economic diplomacy, I think the most common instrument is trade. every country wants to increase its export and every country wants to reduce its import. Import is generally seen as a drain of precious foreign exchange resources, and it also creates vulnerabilities in many cases. And we had the example of COVID pandemic when the global supply chain disruptions, we saw the effect of that. And many times we see unregulated exports creating, havoc in the local economy. The local industries get killed, and domestic industries suffer a lot. Probably that's the reason why most of the countries are generally possessive of market access. We are, I think, all familiar about the recent past when the American and the Chinese were tussling over tariff and market access. There was no talk of restrictions on the 5G technologies. Then, also talk of restriction of foreign investment in certain sectors. So these are some examples how countries identify economic issues with their national interest. Like recently, you would have seen India refuse to join RCEP. We are revising our bilateral investment treaties. So these are examples of flexibility a country employs to use economic tools to protect national interest. There are other instances when certain countries, I think I would refer to a certain country, who uses its huge foreign exchange reserves to provide aid and assistance to countries in Asia, Africa, and Latin America. And they use this leverage to increase their export, to secure natural resources, and to build critical infrastructure in different parts of the world, which act as catalysts to enhance its own presence further. So you have both use of economic diplomacy, both in a positive way, as a competition with the other countries, but it's not necessarily competition all the way and all the time. So you have examples when countries cooperate with each other to create win-win situation. So like you have trade agreements, bilateral investment treaties, avoidance of double taxation agreements. You also have, use of domestic currencies for bilateral trade, developing barter system, creating green corridor for, smooth movement of certain commodities. So these are the examples of countries working together and not necessarily competing. And you also have example of European Union, ASEAN, Eurasian Economic Union. These are the economic blocs who develop common economic policy, common economic diplomacy to benefit from this union. I stay in Tanzania, which is an Eastern African country. Even here in Africa, the talk of the town at the moment is African Continental Free Trade Agreement. So this agreement would not only increase intra-regional trade, but it would also attract foreign investment, primarily because, the whole continent would be seen as a single market with very less territorial or geographical restrictions. Let's talk about Indian economic diplomacy. In the world of, decentralized globalization, which we use these days. In this world of decentralized globalization, we strive to develop our close economic ties with as many countries as possible. We want to enhance our export footprint. We want to have more foreign direct investment in our economic growth. And we want to secure critical technologies needed for our industrialization. And mind you, we don't want to be left behind in Industrial Revolution 4.0, like we were left behind in the previous industrial revolutions. So I'll quickly jump over to some challenges that we faced and how Indian economic diplomacy grew over the year. Let me give the example of 1973, when the Arab countries of OPEC, they decided to put oil embargo, leading to a rise in oil prices almost by 4 times overnight. So we, of course, now being a developing country, we started having foreign exchange problems. And to deal with this unexpected challenge, our people employed a very innovative strategy. So we worked with the Arab countries, and we tried to get Indian companies, get turnkey projects, consultancy assignments. We started sending our skilled and semi-skilled people to work there. Now you have 8 million Indian people working in Gulf, primarily, which started with the oil boom. And you have similar presence of Indian in Silicon Valley, which started in 1980s. And now put together, we are receiving about $83 billion of remittances from these Indian people working abroad. So it was more of an example of challenge getting converted into an opportunity. So during the initial years, we had, of course, heavy dependence on foreign aid and assistance. So those days, the Paris meeting of Aid India Consortium was the major event. And our diplomacy was focused to get more assistance from donor countries and international financial institutions. After, of course, the 1991 economic reform, the economic diplomacy landscape underwent, severe changes. Then the focus got shifted to maximize export, mobilize FDI, and Indian companies to have access to technology and to while not losing sight from the receiving aid and assistance from developed countries. But then the subsequent years, we then saw further changes. Now we started focusing on the management of regulations like free trade agreements, energy access arrangements, regional diplomacy. We signed our first free trade agreement in 1999 with Sri Lanka. Then subsequently, we had other agreements, similar agreements with Singapore, Thailand. And now, of course, we are rephrasing our free trade agreements. We are doing comprehensive economic cooperation agreements. I think at the moment, our negotiations on comprehensive economic cooperation is going on with United Kingdom, with European Union, Australia. I think today morning our ministers were talking, Canada, UAE, Israel, and the Gulf, GCC countries. So these are all at different, advanced stage of negotiations. Now, in India, you see the industry bodies like CII, FICCI, ASSOCHAM. We have different industry bodies even in our states. They have been playing a very critical role in promoting brand India abroad, while they also lobby for Indian companies, in the foreign countries. They work very closely with Indian embassies. They take delegations to participate in different international fairs. They arrange B2B engagements. They play a critical role. However, when you see Indian diplomacy's characteristics, unlike other countries, our focus has always been on win-win partnership, and not making our economic diplomacy conditional or not to use it as a coercive tool like certain countries do it. So we developed our flagship scheme of ITEC, which is Indian Technical Economic Cooperation, in 1964, even while we are a developing country. So this was more like an assistance program to poor and developing countries, which is now spread over 161 countries. And our development partnership has now grown to cover line of credits, which is more like soft credit. At the moment, we have given over $30 billion of soft credit. We have granting assistance program of about $4 billion. We have technical consultancy. I'll give an example in Tanzania. This is, in Tanzania itself, we have over $1 billion of.
Please mute yourself. Others, please, sir, continue.
Okay. So, in recent past, in December 2020, our foreign minister dedicated the website of economic diplomacy. That's a MEA website focused on economic diplomacy. If you go through the website, you will see the reference about, the major sectors where India could benefit in increasing exports, the sectors where you can attract investment, the schemes, where we are promoting export and investment. And we are also giving details about the 28 states and 8 union territories, giving their strength and even going to the state level of opportunities. We have also set a target of $400 billion of merchandise export and $250 billion of services export this financial year. And our target is to reach a $2 trillion export by 2030. So it's a quite ambitious target. Prime Minister has also launched the Atmanirbhar Bharat Abhiyan, which is, I think, quite well known by now. But under that scheme of 2020, we have so far, announced stimulus of about $400 billion, which is almost like 15% of our GDP. And this is primarily designed to open up new avenues of trade and investment in post-COVID period. And I think the production-linked incentives are quite well known by now. These are kind of sectoral incentives in different sectors where we would give incentive to people who would invest. I think combined effort of all these things has led to, historical flow of FDI. So in last year, we got about $80 billion of foreign direct investment and about $60 billion of equity investment. So it's important to realize that without effective economic diplomacy, we'll find it difficult to achieve that target of $5 trillion economy by 2025. And of course, this requires that all entities, like I said, the public-private sector, the states, Indian embassies, the chambers of commerce, all need to come and work together in a very effective manner. Then only we will achieve that $5 trillion target. Coming to the way we work in embassies, now we like the private sectors, we also are given key performance indicators. Our performance is evaluated on the basis of these indicators. So, for example, trade, technology, tourism, these are the 3 T's on which the embassies are required to achieve concrete results these days. The Prime Minister, Commerce Minister, Foreign Minister, they regularly review the performance of economic diplomacy. I'll give you one example. When I was in Moscow, the Prime Minister visited Vladivostok in September 2019, just before COVID. And with Russia, we signed 49 agreements and MOUs, and vast majority of 35 of them were on economic investment, technology-related agreements. I think if you compare it 20 years back, it would be predominantly political agreements, but now the shift is towards economic engagement, economic agreement, even having private and public sector agreements in the summit level meetings. There is another positive thing that Indian diaspora and Indian companies, they are now playing major role in international arena. Indian diaspora members are in important business and political positions. In many countries, you have Indian companies who have earned tremendous amount of goodwill. So a successful economic diplomacy would call for having all of them work together as part of the same Team India. There are also several non-state actors these days, the global multinational companies, the sovereign wealth funds, pension funds, R&D companies. Then you have the international organizations like WTO. Then you have, the climate change regime. Then you have international maritime civil aviation guidelines. These are issues which are affecting not only our economy, but our politics. And all countries, including India, have to be alert and have to be, engaged with them to get the maximum out of it. A positive change I would like to mention is, in our economic diplomacy is the role of states. Now, Indian states are playing very active role. A lot of states include, I think most of the states are playing very important role. You have example of vibrant Gujarat, which has been making news internationally. You have many states in the country who are having arrangement, twin state arrangements with the other countries of the world. You are having states visiting the important capitals of the world, working closely with the embassies. And MEA has set up a states division for coordination of such activities of different states. Another positive development, I think, is the increasing shift, of the international companies of their manufacturing base to India. So it's a very slow process. We have seen that happening in last few years, but we are certainly seeing that companies are now trying to shift their supply, chain network. They are shifting their manufacturing base to other countries, and India is one of the main beneficiary of that. I'll cite one very interesting example of success of Indian economic diplomacy. We were a major civilian donor in Afghanistan. As you know, in 2001, when the civilian government came in Afghanistan, India was a major civilian donor. And in last 20 years, we did a lot of development projects. We provided scholarships. We did women empowerment. We did a lot of civilian projects. And that has earned us so much of goodwill that even after Taliban takeover, I think, we are having very less thing to worry about from Afghanistan, primarily because of those tools we employed those days. Now, let me speak a little bit about the energy diplomacy. Like I said, I was working in the ministry for 5 years, so I have some amount of first-hand experience. I have seen how it works in the world. And energy, as we all agree, is like a backbone of the country and economy. So in simple language, energy diplomacy is working towards energy security of your country. However, energy security means differently to different countries. For a country like United States, it would simply mean availability of energy. While for a country like India, it would be both availability and affordability to the mass people. So, and you have some examples, interesting examples like Venezuela. They are the largest reservoir of crude oil, but now having scarcity of petroleum products since their refineries don't work. So, energy security means, like I said, differently to different people. And energy diplomacy, as a term, it gained currency. Energy diplomacy, as I said, it gained currency in 1973. Used like as a tool for foreign policy. Used it for their national prosperity. Used it for their national now prosperity. We have OPEC countries, and even now we have like countries, and even use oil and gas as a they use oil and gas as a to advance their national interest. To advance their national interest. I would say that oil has important role in shaping the geopolitics and geopolitics in last 50 years. And that's the reason why oil is considered not as political commodity, as an economic one. Now let's see where does India stand in this. India is the third largest energy consumer in the world. And its consumption is rapidly increasing with growth in economy and rising in the middle class. According to all international agencies, our energy consumption is going to double by 2040. Whereas we remain predominantly importing country with 85% of our oil and 25% of our natural gas coming from other countries. And majority of this is sourced from one region, that is the Middle East. We are also import dependent on other sources of energy like coking coal, which is primarily used for steel manufacturing. And going forward, I think this import is going to increase since our consumption is going to increase. So it becomes very tricky for a government or a country to plan energy security when you are predominantly dependent on imports for majority of your energy supply. And the other challenge is that majority of your people cannot afford this kind of imported expensive energy. So, and I think the prices of this commodity, as you know, are not decided by us. These are the very volatile things. So in pipelines, I spent in Petroleum Ministry. I saw crude oil fluctuating from $112 per barrel in 2014 to $30 per barrel. I saw LNG prices fluctuating from $16 to $4 per MMBTU. So this is the kind of volatility that we face. So in this background, Government of India has outlined the principles of energy justice, which are more like availability of energy for all, affordability of energy to the poorest of the poor, energy efficiency, energy sustainability, and of course energy security. Recently, we saw Prime Minister making a commitment in COP26 in Glasgow for clean and green energy transition. So which is indicative that in coming years we'll see a major shift, a major transition in our energy consumption and the type of energy that we'll be using. So India is bound to now develop other sources of clean energy to meet its energy demand. So following a clear path of energy diplomacy, India is engaging all important stakeholders. Our energy collaboration has become important facet of our bilateral engagements with our traditional partners as well as newly emerging energy suppliers. We have now UAE, USA, Russia, where our energy relationship has shifted from bilateral relationship to that of a strategic partnership. So if you ask me, what are the salient features of energy diplomacy? I would say, the main features should be like securing uninterrupted and timely supply of oil and gas, to have geographical diversification, and widening of oil and gas sourcing so that we are not hostage to a particular region and the conflicts in a particular region. Then having equity in oil and gas blocks around the world, to develop a kind of a joint approach so that we go together and have a big ticket investment in different countries. Then most importantly, we have to leverage our market. India is the second biggest middle class market in the world now. So we have to leverage that market and get the best deals from the countries. Our focus is to attract foreign investment for our oil and gas sector and our petrochemical and gas infrastructure. We are now building energy corridors with our neighboring countries, and we are to be agile to encash the opportunities whenever they are there. Like for example, during COVID pandemic, the oil prices went down drastically. And that was a time when we took that opportunity, bought oil to fill up our strategic reserves. So you also have to leverage, your engagement with the multilateral agencies who play some role in the energy diplomacy, like OPEC, like International Energy Agency, International Energy Forum. So where you need to go and voice your concerns. So it's part of our policy of diversification of energy sourcing and reduce dependence on OPEC. We in last 5 years we added suppliers of oil. So at the moment you have Russia, you have US, you have Canada, Angola, Guyana, Mexico, who are the new supplier of oil, contrast to all suppliers coming from Middle East all the time. Similarly, we have now no LNG supply coming not only from Qatar, but from Australia, USA, Russia. So as a result of these things, our dependence on oil and gas from the Middle Eastern region has drastically gone down, which is a good thing. So that you are not vulnerable to instability in a particular region now. Now, oil prices, as you know, is not decided by us. So it's not fully market determined. It's not it's actually decided by the suppliers, even if we don't like it that way. So now for last few years, we see unusual solidarity among the OPEC countries and the non-OPEC producers. Now they are jointly called as OPEC Plus. They try to keep the oil prices higher than what the market forces would determine. And in this background, we have been, raising our voice very strongly. We are raising our reservations, and we have been, telling that the prices should be reflective of the consumer country's reality. Otherwise, in long term, it would be unsustainable. Now, in November 2021, I think a few months back, it was a symbolic gesture, but in coordination with the other countries, we, as a mark of protest, we released 5 billion barrels of crude oil from our strategic reserve. This was just to mark a protest about the artificiality of price rise done by the OPEC Plus countries. So on the LNG front, like I mentioned, we have diversified our import. We are also kind of not taking advantage of the price fluctuations to renegotiate the deals. We did it in 2015 with Qatar, which almost reduced the LNG prices to half, or rather more than half. We have also negotiated the LNG prices recently with Australia, with Russia, which has led to a good amount of savings. There are 2 new areas of energy which are coming up. One is biofuel, new in India. Of course, it's not very new, and the other one is hydrogen. And there also we are doing good advancement. I mentioned about overseas asset acquisition. Just a statistics, presently our PSUs have stakes in oil and gas blocks in 52 assets in 22 countries, and our investment would be about, say, $39 billion. So, and I was mentioning about biofuel. The government has come out with a policy of mixing ethanol up to 20% in petrol, and which would essentially mean that you would import less amount of crude oil, and you will use your domestic biomass, which is in abundance, to produce fuel to mix petrol. And in that regard, we are cooperating with Brazil, USA, and other Scandinavian countries to get the best of technology to convert our abundance of biofuel into fossil fuel, so that we reduce our imports. And on hydrogen also, we are trying to position. You must be hearing about the news of Indian private sector, talking about huge investment in hydrogen sector. So we are also talking to countries who are on the front line of research on hydrogen. We think that going forward, India can be a regional center of hydrogen production. We are talking to USA, Norway, UAE, and other multilateral agencies on this issue. And I think that is one area where, in 20 years, 30 years down the line, we'll have, a lot of progress happening around the world, and we don't want to be left behind on that. I'll just conclude by giving few examples of energy partnership that we have developed with few countries. I have spent 4 years in Russia, and, I have seen it happening firsthand. Russia is in the forefront. We have invested about $16 billion in Russia. Starting from the Far East region of Sakhalin to the central Russia, and we have equity in 5 peak producing blocks in Russia. Russia also happens to be the largest investor in Indian oil and gas sector. They invested about $13 billion in 2017 to buy the SR refinery in Gujarat. And we have also, in 2020, we signed an agreement whereby we'll, for the first time, start importing oil from Russia, like I said, as a part of our diversification of energy sourcing strategy. We are similarly now importing LNG as well as coking coal for our steel sector from Russia. US is a rather interesting example. Like 4 years back, there was no import from United States. Rather, United States had a ban on exporting any energy resource from that country. But now in 2020, 2021, United States is our 4th largest source of crude oil and 3rd largest source of LNG. And, like I said, it's just a recent development, but it has progressed very, very well in a very short period of time. Our relationship with Middle Eastern countries, are old. They were the primary energy sources, but it was always a buyer and seller relationship. Now we have elevated this relationship with UAE, with Saudi, to that of a strategic partnership, focusing on energy. UAE is, like our 3rd largest source of crude oil and 2nd largest source of LPG. Saudi used to be our largest source of crude oil. So these are important countries, and we need to have, more strategic relationship with them. So when UAE invested in our strategic petroleum reserves, and we got a, equity in, first time we got equity in offshore oil field of UAE. That was a big transition in our relationship and the nature of our relationship. I'll speak a little bit about our neighborhood because that always remains a priority for Indian foreign policy. We supply about 100% of petroleum products in Nepal and in Bhutan. We used to do that for Mauritius as well. In 2019 September, we laid the first cross-border petroleum pipeline to Nepal, whereby we'll be supplying the petroleum products not by trucks anymore, but by pipeline. We are doing a similar pipeline project with Bangladesh, which should be complete in 2022. Our companies are similarly active in Myanmar, Sri Lanka, Mauritius. So, it's more like a focus on neighborhood policy. We have a no disturbed Western neighborhood. Otherwise, we had a plan to get a pipeline from Turkmenistan. Now, India has strengthened its engagement with the primary major suppliers of energy and also with the international organizations, like I mentioned, OPEC, IEA, and IEF. And these organizations are helpful in a sense, that we play a role in the narrative setting. And presently, all oil-producing countries are now sensitive to our views, and India is seen as the leading voice representing consuming countries. So to sum up, economic and energy diplomacy are, I think, they are critical elements of statecraft, but at least in 21st century. All countries are heavily focused on them, so we are competing against everybody while we have to cooperate with them also. And, many countries have now, number of specialists who are working on this aspect. As far as India is concerned, our integration of economic and energy diplomacy with foreign policy is giving better dividend. It has helped better integration with the world in terms of beneficial, for us. And it has brought rich economic and strategic dividends, and it has provided energy security to an aspiring and ever-growing India. I would conclude here. I'll thank all of you for your attention. If there is any particular question, I'll try to answer that. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Actually, you will be happy to know that our Pro-Chancellor, Professor Amit Banerjee, many deans, faculties, even professors outside the university, students from different African countries and other areas, and the volunteers, all of them belong to your audience. And the talk is so structured that if somebody is preparing for civil services examination, you will take lot of facts and informations from your talk. They will be immensely benefited. Now, before letting others ask you questions, I have got just a simple questions. Now, in the context of this ABC of economic and energy diplomacy, I understand the economic diplomacy part, but as far as energy diplomacy is concerned, vis-a-vis our position in Africa, can you kindly shed some light on it? I think to frame the question in a better way is that energy is the driving force for our African diplomacy?
Africa is a continent of 54 countries. So some of them are energy rich, like, for example, Nigeria. It's a major source of Indian crude oil import. Mauritius is an African country. Like I said, we used to supply 100% of its oil requirements. In Mozambique, which is just down south of Tanzania, we have invested more than $9 billion. Indian public sector companies have invested $9 billion. And when the LNG terminal comes up, we'll be getting LNG from Mozambique. We have investment in Sudan. We have investment in Gabon. So these are the few countries where we have made investment in terms of having presence in their oil and gas blocks. Now, the relationship with Africa it's more like a priority area these days. In 2016, I was part of the India-Africa Hydrocarbon Conference, which was organized in New Delhi, where 21 energy ministers of Africa attended that. And we found areas of commonalities to work, so if not getting oil and gas from those countries, at least we can send our engineering companies to work in their refineries. At least we can send our technical manpower. So I'm sure, all the energy-rich countries of Africa at the moment are having, huge number of Indian experts working in their oil verticals. But coming to your specific question whether energy is the driving force of India-Africa relationship, I would say it's one of the important tenets of our relationship with Africa.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Any other questions, please? Yes, please, Brahmadev ji, please unmute yourself. He is the Dean of our Veterinary Sciences. Please unmute yourself. Please unmute. Sir, please unmute yourself.
Unmute.
Please unmute yourself. Brahmadev, sir. Somehow. Sir, please unmute yourself. We are not able to hear you. Please unmute. No. Any other question? Probably he is not able to. Sir, please unmute yourself.
Sir is looking like Rakesh Jhunjhunwala.
Sir, can I ask a question?
Yes, please.
Sir, I have a question that, sir, since you know that Moscow and Kiev are means on a verge of war, so what do you think will happen to the prices of natural gas and petroleum on an international level as well as in India? And do you think that India can tackle this kind of situation by again opening its strategic oil reserves? Or and one more thing, what do you think will happen to Nord Stream 2?
Vinas, can you introduce yourself, please?
Sir, I'm Avinash Nanda. I'm currently preparing for civil services.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. It's a situation which is evolving at the moment. I think everybody is concerned about the situation. The situation and what is happening between Russia and Ukraine. Now, if a military conflict erupts between the two countries, I'm not saying that it would lead to a military conflict. I think it's in everybody's interest that there is no military conflict on that border. It's in Russia's interest, it's in Ukraine's interest, it's in everybody's interest. But hypothetically speaking, if there is a military conflict, not only between Russia and Ukraine, but military conflict anywhere, it would definitely lead to a rise in oil prices. But generally, what happens when you have a rise in oil price, it is more like any other commodity. So the demand and supply get balanced over a period of time. So to answer your question, yes, if there is a conflict, it would lead to rise in oil prices. But all such rises are generally temporary. Neither Russia nor any one country is a predominant supplier of energy in the world. So the sentiments would be affected, the prices would rise, but I think eventually in few weeks' time it would settle down.
Yes, sir. Now it is okay. Hello.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir, we can hear you.
Now, Veterinary Dean, you can ask your question. Yes.
Yeah. Sir, this is Brahmadev Patnaik, Dean of the Veterinary School. I must thank Mr. Pradhan for an excellent talk. Really, it is sensitizing. But, sir, my one query is that the economic diplomacy has been a double-edged sword. Some countries have been using it for undue advantages over other countries, which is not the spirit of economic diplomacy. So there are ample examples of a few countries doing that because giving money and taking away many things. So is there any system to have a check and balances? Because if somebody is paying me some money, how do you know his intents? That is one thing. Is there any system to check and balances? It is happening in many examples nowadays between countries like Sri Lanka has been almost problem, many countries. The second thing is that the role of energy diplomacy in ruining countries like Iraq and Libya. Was it energy diplomacy which spoiled these two countries, Libya and Iraq?
Okay, so
My queries only,
the
sir, not questions, because I want to. Yeah.
right. No, like I think I told myself that certain country, is using its huge foreign reserves to give aid and using it to its advantage. So, but this has been happening since historical times. So it's up to the country now who receives such economic assistance to be careful and to not get into such kind of arrangement where their sovereignty would be compromised in future. So that's what I said, that while we do our economic diplomacy, we go for a win-win situation. Whereas I think, you didn't like to name the country. I also don't like to name any country, but we know about such instances. But like I said, there is no international mechanism to stop such things. But the good thing is that now there is increasing awareness. And I stay in Africa where, the debt to GDP ratio has been very alarming. Some countries have more than 50% debt to GDP ratio. Some people are even having 80% debt compared to their GDP. So the good thing is that now countries are becoming increasingly aware of such situation. The other countries are, trying to come in as some kind of substitute and providing better financing mechanism. But I think this is going to continue because many countries are at the bottom of the development stage. They require financing. Their domestic financing mechanisms are not existent, so they would depend upon foreign assistance. But at the same time, I think they have to be careful about what kind of agreements they're entering in.
Right, sir.
And you were mentioning about Iraq and Syria.
Libya.
I think Libya. So I think I'll answer it in a general way. We are all familiar with the phrase called resource curse. So you have many countries who are natural resource-wise very rich, but in the development stage they are very low, or even economic sense they are very poor. So it depends on several things, and when you are having natural resources, you would be subjected to international pulls and push. Now people would try to have presence in your natural resources. They have their footprint in your natural resources. So it's up to individual countries to to protect their sovereignty while making the best use of their natural resources. I would stop at that to that question.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Any other questions? Anybody?
Sir, I want to ask that what India can do more in order to save countries like Tanzania and East African countries from debt trap. That's all I want to ask.
Okay, like I said, Africa is a focus country, a focus continent for India. In 2015, during the India-Africa Summit, we announced of $10 billion of line of credit and almost $1 billion of grant. In terms of scholarship, I think, except next to our neighboring countries, Africa is the biggest beneficiary. So we are presenting a model to countries over here that you can, have a development partnership with India without, at all compromising with your sovereignty. You don't have to sign into clauses that if you are not able to repay, you have to surrender your critical infrastructures. But we are ourselves a developing country, so we have limited resources in terms of offering to African countries. But yes, in African countries, Indian model is very often cited as probably the most benign and most good model of development partnership. And at least in Tanzania, we are considered to be the best model of development partnership as far as independent countries go.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. John Prabhu, you have raised your hand. He is our student from Uganda, reading in final year BTech. Yes, Prabhu, you can ask your question.
Yes, thank you so much, sir. And thank you so much, His Excellency, sir, for your such an educative talk. Mine is more of an inquiry. I would like to be once more educated about which parameters could we use to evaluate the energy security in most of the East African countries, keeping Tanzania in question, whereby there's a situation, because His Excellency shared about the energy security being used as a tool of foreign policy and was started off in 1973. So I'm inquiring what parameter is used to evaluate a situation whereby, for example, taking Uganda in particular as my home country, where I find a scenario that energy, talking about hydroelectric power, that is much more costly to the citizens than in a neighboring country like DRC Congo. So I would like to be educated about which parameters. Could it be availability or affordability like you shared under the energy security, sir? Thank you so much.
Very often you come into the dilemma about, affordability vis-a-vis availability. But I think for many of the countries, I think most of the countries, it's both are critically important. If you don't have energy available, affordability doesn't make any sense. There is no availability. And you have situations where energy is available, but then, people cannot afford to pay for it. But coming to Uganda and East African kind of a scenario, I think, the situation is improving. Like now we are hearing about the Uganda-Tanzania crude oil pipeline, which is being developed by Total. And, you also have good hydroelectric projects. You are very right now mentioning about the high tariff or high cost of this electricity. But, end of the day, I think no country can progress without energy. The governments have to find innovative ways how to make energy affordable. Otherwise, any imported energy would be instantly unaffordable. In India, we had, subsidy in all kind of energy. We had subsidy in petrol, we had subsidy in diesel, we had subsidy in LPG.
Breaks out, America can put CATSA sanctions on India for selling Brahmos and AK-203 or 103? Spasiba.
Okay, so these are in the realm of speculation, but still I'll tell you that countries go to war, and that doesn't necessarily put us in a box, to choose relationship. Our relationship stand in its own merit. We are close to United States, we are close to Russia, we are close to many other countries. We live in a multipolar world, and we have to develop our relationship with each one of them. And like I said, it's a decentralized, globalized world now. So in that scenario, we, suppose there is a conflict between countries. We don't take sides in the conflict. We maintain our relationship with all the countries, irrespective of whether they're in a military conflict or not. Coming to your specific question, whether American sanctions should kick in on India or not, these are in the realm of speculation, and I have seen these questions being asked for last 3 years now. But I guess India has achieved a different status at the moment, and we don't need to worry about such things when we make our own economic and diplomatic strategies. So I would rather conclude to take in a way of telling you not to worry about such things.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your patience, and thank you for taking so many questions, and you have answered so nicely. The university is looking forward to your leadership in having MOUs of our university with Dar es Salaam University. So at least we will be expecting that you will help us in achieving that kind of goal. And also, if possible, we will also explore new opportunities of having satellite campuses in Dar es Salaam also, because we are also, our university is also focusing or giving much more emphasis on African students. So we are really privileged that in spite of your busy schedule and such a high position, you have agreed to speak to our deans, professors, students, and I think everybody is very happy with your talk. Particularly if you civil service aspirants are also there, who has asked, as I have mentioned it very nicely. Now, I will request our Dean, Professor Brahmadev Patnaik, to kindly accord the vote of thanks. Sir.
Thank you so much, sir. And it's really delightful to hear from the experienced person in foreign service, the two from Odisha state. These two topics, energy diplomacy and economic diplomacy, have been the talk of the day. It can be mutually benefited. it can be unilaterally it could cause damage. So our worry is only that because we are a growing economy. Maybe after a few years we'll be $5 trillion economy. So India's things have been very, very sincere. It could be India, Afghanistan, it could be anywhere. But there are many, I would not say unscrupulous, but there are many doubtful minds who use these two elements, very important elements, economy and energy, both related, to take another nation for granted, to take undue advantage. So, in our opinion, there should be some check and balance because, like you said, sir, the country at the bottom of the line doesn't have a choice. Doesn't have. It happened with Nepal. It happened with Sri Lanka of late. It is also happening in our other neighbors like Myanmar, everywhere. So it is certainly not also worry for India. The countries around us.
Brahmadev sir, we are running short of time. So,
And sir, thank you so much, sir, for
kindly accord the vote
delightful
of thanks to the
and
speaker.
enlightening all of us. And on behalf of SOA, the President, the Vice Chancellor, the Pro Vice Chancellor, and the dynamic Dr. Nachiketa Sharma, I thank you, sir. Thank you so much. And maybe you will give us another opportunity sometime to hear from you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank
The
you.
meeting is over. Thank you. you.